Okay, we're back. We're live. It's Monday. It's our first show. It's 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock rock, with midnight in Brussels. I'm not sure it's midnight there. It might be 11 o'clock, depending. With Gauri Khandekar of Global Relations Forum, joins us from Brussels. Hi, Gauri.
Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for having me once again.
Always. We want you on all the time, as often as we can get you. So what
Thank-
time is it in Brussels?
It's 11 o'clock.
Okay.
11 p.m., yes.
Then I don't feel as guilty as I might for calling you late at night.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. Thanks to technology, really.
So yes, it's wonderful, and you're clear as a bell. So here we have a show we called, let's see, what is it? Migrants, Money, and Madness. And when we take a look at Europe and places around Europe, we see just that, migrants, money, and madness. So let's talk about what's on the street. What are people talking about in Europe? You know, before, it was like Europe existed with little fringe problems around the migrants. Now you've told me it's like on everybody's mind and everybody's talking about it all day. Tell me the tone and temperature in Europe.
Yes, you know, the program today is so aptly titled. It's exactly what everybody's discussing. I mean, you know, in the US elections, you might hear a lot about migrants and building walls, but here, I mean, the problem is quite palpable, right? You have a huge crisis related not only to the economy, which is still growing very slowly, if at all, and then you have a large influx of migrants. And politically, it's spilling over. Actually, Brussels is quite a special city because it's close to the EU institutions and it's a bit detached from reality. And you know, it's actually called the EU bubble. So everyone you meet is either working in the EU or with the EU. So you don't really discuss day-to-day issues, you know, that as you might in other cities.
Mm-hmm.
But despite that, I mean, in my conversations with everyone here, either working in the EU or with or not, all we seem to discuss are the migrants issues or, you know, the economy. And it's a change. It's a complete change from what we discussed or what we spoke about a few months back, even, you know. It's completely changed. And if you go to the center of Brussels, like I was a couple of days ago, you literally see boards. Of course, you see a lot more of migrants, but you see boards which actually signal, you know, do not pee here, you know, respect women, kind of those kind of boards. It's quite funny. It's quite funny, but it's quite true as well. I mean, it just kind of wakes you up to reality.
Well, it's, you know, before, I mean, we've tracked this through with you. It's so interesting to sort of connect the dots. First, it was almost hypothetical, didn't affect the man on the street. And then it affected the man on the street because there were crimes and then terrorism. And I think people began to, you know, see the migrants as connected with terrorism. And then there was reaction, you know, the sort of right-wing reaction. And now, how would you characterize it now? Now it seems to be sweeping everybody, you know, it's on everybody's front of mind, top of mind. But how do they feel? How are they?
Well, Brussels is quite different in this sense. I mean, you know, the migrants have not yet been linked to terrorism here, unlike in Germany, no, in many cities of Germany as well. Here you've had homegrown terrorists and the perpetrators of the Paris attacks, basically.
Yes.
So there's also a problem within that has to be tackled first. And what's been missing in the integration policies, but over a period of decades. So that's completely different. But you know, the whole mood in Europe is quite depressive. I mean, there's such a large gamut of issues that have come up, and serious issues, and not only inside Europe and the EU and its member states, but also its neighborhood. Its neighborhood is becoming more unstable. So dealing with all of this in a very grim economic climate is something that's getting the morale down.
Yeah,
See?
and people worry about all these things. They worry about money. Well, I suppose if you have a lot of migrants coming and the economy's not so good and people are not in the mood to give them jobs, they wind up being, living in the parks. They wind up without jobs, without money, and they go on the public dole, and that's off the top of government funding. So the result is that it's a threat to the stability, the financial stability of the government of the country, which has them living in the parks. I mean, are people resentful of that it costs money?
Well, thankfully, until now, we've not seen many people living in the parks, mainly because it's a bit too cold, but also perhaps because here in Western Europe and in smaller countries like Belgium in particular, the system is still working as good. Yeah, I mean, there's still housing and facilities. If you would go to Greece, for example, or Italy, there they are really over flooded because they're the first port of entry, and most migrants before they get to travel outside. I mean, you literally see them coming on the boats, and everywhere basically in those cities, in some of the cities. So here it's still contained in that sense, but you're very correct. Because these states are social welfare states, because wealth is repartitioned after amongst the people and those who need it the most, that might get impacted in the coming years. Because if you don't have high skilled labor, already you have a demographic mushroom, which means that many more people are growing older. The baby boomers are growing old and will retire soon, and there are not many young people, and so a smaller population is going to bear a burden of a larger population. If you add to that unemployed migrants and migrant families, then that's going to be untenable, right?
Yeah.
The whole system risks to be collapsed, and unless some really sustainable solution, short-term, immediate solution is found. Otherwise, it can go out of hand quite quickly.
Yeah, but now in Greece, they've had their financial problems. In Greece, we know they were ready to fall down the side, fall down the slope, and Germany and other countries in Europe bailed them out again and again. Right now, they have lots of migrants in Greece who can't cross the border because bordering states don't want them to cross the border, and Greece has to take the hit for supporting them. What condition is Greece in these days? It must be in duress.
Yes, well, basically all the talks that have been now are mainly linked to that. So under this thing called the Dublin Convention, that EU member states had signed, the first country of port of entry, let's say, of the migrants, are the country which will basically welcome them and house them in a way, settle them, but because the number of migrants coming to Greece and Italy was so huge, they could not basically accommodate them, and so they were allowed to go on. Yes, to go on to the neighboring countries. Most of these migrants have chosen, actually refugees and asylum seekers, they've chosen to go on to Germany and the UK. A large number have also been settled in France. So what the EU has been doing, and this is one of the main reasons why there's so much infighting as well going on inside the EU, is because they want to have a system of burden sharing, which means that they will distribute around 160,000 migrants amongst EU member states in an equitable fashion. That's what's been agreed already, and that's and in the future as well, they would be repartitioned equally.
So is that in place now? Is that happening now?
The 160,000, yes, but there are more coming. They've more come in the first couple of months of 2016 than the entire of 2015. So that's a huge problem, and that's why the deal with Turkey is important at the moment, because Turkey would basically take back some of these migrants and also help to stem the flow of migrants coming to the EU.
Yeah, I understand that Turkey now, today, has 2 million migrants who have crossed its eastern border and are living in Turkey in camps. And Turkey has asked the EU for $3 billion in order to support them, because Turkey can't afford to take care of 2 million migrants. This puts all kinds of pressure on everybody. I mean, when you start tallying up the numbers of migrants and what it costs to take care of them and where that's going to come from, it must be putting huge pressure on every country and on the EU collectively. Can you see a solution here? Can you see, aside from distributing them equitably around the EU, is there a financial solution, or is this just going to put, incredible pressure on every member?
Actually, countries like Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, and Turkey have been the ones that have held most of the refugees. Have welcomed most. Jordan, in particular, is the one that has welcomed the largest number, especially in terms of per capita, if you see. So the largest host of refugees per capita in the world, according to, of course, the UNHCR. So this deal was already signed with Turkey, or was negotiated with Turkey on October 15 of last year, worth 3 billion euros. So by that, Turkey would provide temporary protection to the Syrian refugees. They would prevent them from crossing to the EU. But Turkey had a few demands, right? So they wanted greater political and financial engagement for the EU, that the EU overlooks their human rights records for some time, and of course the acceleration of visa liberalization for Turkish nationals. And finally, of course, Turkey's accession process to the EU, because Turkey wants to become a member of the EU for a long time now.
Yes.
And now, just today, I think less than 500 meters from my home, there's been a summit going on, an EU-Turkey summit, where they're rehashing the deal. They're trying to get this deal done, and now Turkey is asking for double the amount of money. So it's really largely about money, but also because Turkey knows that it's in a sweet spot, yes? I don't think there's going to be a problem of the refugee settlement, or or kind of rechanneling them back. Of course, that's something that could be expected in a way. I mean, you cannot not expect it. But Turkey is in the negotiator's position. Basically, it's in a really sweet spot where it can really push EU member states to even reopen their accession. But as of now, I mean, the latest news, hot of the plate, is that Hungary has vetoed the deal, and Greece as well as Cyprus have issues with parts of the deal.
Oh,
So
this is just incredible what's happening. What began as a simple problem of humanity and taking care of people now has become political, financial. And when we get back from this break, Gary, I'd like to talk to you about Britain, about UK, and its apparent issue about whether to stay with the EU at all, and how this migrant problem plays into that. That's Gauri Khandekar. We're here on Midnight in Brussels. We're talking about money, migrants, and madness. We'll be right back.
Aloha! Hello, my name is Patrick Bratton. I'm host of Global Connections here at ThinkTech Hawaii. We broadcast live every Thursday at 1 p.m. We bring Hawaii to the world and the world to Hawaii, talking about international events and various things of interest to the audience. Please join me. I look forward to talking with you and having you get to meet some of my guests. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm the host of Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. We air live on the internet and also on Oceanic Channel 16. I'd invite you to come for a fresh new show every Tuesday from 12 to 1 o'clock. I try to bring on guests that give us a different viewpoint on aspects of sustainability in Hawaii, as well as trying to unpack some of the difficult concepts of measuring and achieving sustainability, particularly with regard to sustainable economic growth and prosperity in Hawaii. Please join us every Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. Mahalo, aloha.
Okay, we're back, we're live, and we are living in interesting times, or at least the people in Europe are. Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum in Brussels, joins us by Skype, and we're talking about midnight in Brussels. We're also, even though it's 11 o'clock, and we're talking about migrants, money, and madness. Yeah, interesting times, and there's no corner of Europe that's not affected by these problems. And you were talking about a paper that you wrote, a study that you made some years ago about the future of Europe. Can you talk about that and compare it to what's going on now, Gauri?
Sure. I mean, just a decade ago, literally, everybody was so optimistic about the EU. I mean, the question was, where would Europe be in, 50 years, 25 years or 50 years? There were studies, many studies being done about Europe into EU in 2025 and 2030 and, all those futuristic studies. And the idea most people had was that the EU was moving towards statehood. Yes, it would become a United States of Europe, basically. And nobody could have predicted that in 2016, everybody would basically be discussing whether the EU would survive or not, This was out of question because the EU project had progressed so well. It was, the poster child for regional engagement and regional integration. And what happened now?
The funny thing is that 10 years ago was after George W. Bush's adventure into Iraq. And,
Yes.
that in my view, I'm interested in yours, that sort of started all this in motion somehow. And if we had all been very akamai, we would have seen it coming simply by what was going on in Iraq. What do you think?
I so agree with you. I mean, the Iraq war it laid bare kind of, or it opened up the differences of opinions. I mean, the cracks inside the EU. Yeah? I mean, it was so obvious that, EU was really divided. I mean, you had this regional organization which was, moving towards a common foreign and security policy, even a common defense policy. And here you had it laid bare by, some countries choosing to go with the US, the others not. And that really led to a lot of questions being asked. But even then, since then, the UK has had a very different kind of relationship,
Yeah.
with the EU anyways. Of
Yeah.
course, it went the US way.
The UK has been sort of standoffish with the EU. It's never fully joined, never really got into the currency, never really went all into the EU. And now we have a certain faction, and I'd like to hear more about this, a certain faction in the EU, in Britain, in UK, that wants to separate from the EU altogether. And drop its and this has got to be related to the migrant problem, the threat of ISIS problem, the financial considerations in supporting the migrants. It's like saying, you guys are having so much trouble, we're abandoning ship. Isn't that what it sounds like?
In a way, but the UK has always had this, I wouldn't even say love-hate, this reluctant relationship, with the EU. They've been there. They wanted to take part in the large common market and the area of prosperity that was developing, but they did not want to lose their political sovereignty. And that's what the other EU member states were prepared to lose. So slowly, the EU started integrating more and more. So most of the countries lost their borders. The UK chose to maintain them, the currency as well. Um, and the UK never felt European. I mean, it's something like Hawaii and mainland, but not quite. I mean, I'm sure Hawaii feels very American, but a channel makes all the difference for the UK. For the moment, the UK is really separate, but it does want to kind of impact the EU. 75% of legislation in all EU member states comes from Brussels, basically. More than 75 to
Interesting.
80%.
Yeah.
So most of the people on the street in the UK see it as, being ruled by Brussels rather than London.
Yeah.
And that's becoming a problem. When they see issues like the migrant crisis, of course, that becomes another issue as well. In the Euro crisis, you had the UK as well that was being asked to chip in money to help bail out Greece. And the UK was wondering that, it's not our currency, it's not our issue. Why are we asked to bail out? Why do we have to take financial responsibility? Especially in the migrant crisis, when you see this Calais jungle. I don't know if you've heard the term. There are a large number of migrants that have basically camped out at Calais
Yes.
in France.
Trying to get to UK.
Exactly. Now the whole Calais jungle, as it was dubbed, has been destroyed, and the migrants have been shifted to, another refugee centers or another area that has been developed right there. But that's something that goes through the press, and the UK population and papers have always been Eurosceptic. So now the UK wants to leave. Interestingly, the Americans want the UK to stay because they see it as, the UK can influence the EU.
Well, the U.S. would like to see a strong Europe. It's what do you want to say? A buffer against aggression by Russia these days. They want to see a stable Europe. They want to see an economically healthy Europe because let me throw an idea at you. If Europe begins to come apart, maybe it's already coming apart, then the U.S. is going to be called to bail it out. Isn't that true?
Well, yes and no, I mean, if Europe comes out, if Europe unravels, the EU unravels rather, you will still have a common market in a way. You will still have NATO and the Article 5 of NATO, which is common defense. So you will still have that in a way against Russia. However, what the US currently wants from the UK is that the UK should, as its main ally in Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would influence Europe in the direction that would best suit US foreign policy. So when it comes to, for instance, sanctions against Russia, when the EU is a bloc and the EU is still the largest economic entity in the world, when the EU slaps sanctions on Russia or Myanmar, let's say, or other countries, that they hurt. US, Europe sanctions hurt together. That's one of the main reasons that politically as well, the US would like some influence via UK in the EU.
Sure, and sanctions are important. We have to, it's not war, it's relatively soft power, and sanctions are important, for example, with North Korea, and we have to have solidarity among the EU for that.
Yeah, exactly, and Iran as well, they've really bit hard in Iran, and sanctions have worked in a way. Now you have even the moderates being re-elected in Iran, which is kind of an important political change that's come about. And this has been thanks to US and European efforts. So
where are we in the UK? My recollection is that there'll be a vote pretty soon. It's a plebiscite. It's it's the entire electorate votes on this, just the way, was it Scotland only a few months ago voted on whether to secede from the UK? And now we have the same kind of vote as we've established, a kind of culture point in the UK about seceding. So what's the tone and tenor of that? Are people likely to vote for seceding from the EU?
Yes, funnily enough, yes. Cameron's government, so the Tory government last year, when they wanted to get re-elected, they promised the British population that they would have this referendum. They would hold this referendum if they were re-elected. And now they have to give in to that promise of holding the referendum, which is yes or no referendum directly, you know. Yes, do you want to stay in the EU or do you not? Of course, as referendums go in the UK, it will be worded interestingly. This is what a British friend had explained to me, is that they're not directly worded, you know. But they will still hold it. And this is, I think, the first time ever that a referendum on EU membership has been held inside the UK. If the UK chooses, and the date, by the way, is June 23rd, so maybe we can talk on
Yeah, I
on
hope so,
day
yeah.
or the next, yeah. If the UK if England chooses to vote no, that might be a big problem for Scotland, because the Scots really like the membership of the EU and they would want to stay. And that would create huge problems again for Scottish, Scotland being a part of basically Great Britain, you know.
Well, you know, before before the vote on Scotland, there was a lot of advertising, a lot of politicking, lobbyists, you know, testimonials one way or the other, everybody trying to affect that vote.
Yes.
You think that's going to happen again as we approach June 23rd for the referendum on the EU question?
Oh my God, it's already started. It's already started. So you have an entire political party, basically, which is UKIP, in the UK, which has been for many years campaigning to get out of the EU, you know. And now they're in full swing. There are some leaders also from the Tory government that have said that they would campaign for leaving from the EU. So basically, cabinet ministers and other colleagues of David Cameron.
This is going to be a real vote. This is going to be a very contentious issue, I think.
Yes.
The other thing that's happening is the news in the last couple of days has been that the government in UK is concerned about potential attacks by ISIS. And the UK is on high alert for some reason. I guess they have intelligence along those lines. Now, this has got to be a factor, don't you think, in the vote that goes down on June 23rd?
Yes, of course. There's going to be all sorts of questions that are going to be raised, and, you know, even claims that are going to be made. But one of the issues that is quite important is how different countries inside the EU deal with returning terrorists, for instance, from Syria or, you know, Iraq. Are they prosecuted? Are they not? Criminal matters, because criminal justice is not harmonized inside. So criminal laws are not the same in every EU member state. And then you have a free movement within the European Union, which also includes, of course, Britain, yes? So these are issues, of course, also which include deportations of EU nationals from the UK back to EU member states, which are currently discussed. So you're extremely right. So including terrorists, but also, you know, criminals, they do impact the debate. They are going to be contentious issues during the campaigns, and they might affect the vote. You never know.
Yeah.
This is a touch and go vote.
Yeah. Well, as the threat grows, I mean, assuming it will, then that works in favor of those who would vote to terminate the ties with the EU, and it is seemed to, you know, be growing in Africa, for example. The news reporter early today was that the U.S. had bombed, I guess, using both manned and unmanned vehicles, air vehicles. A training camp for ISIS south of Mogadishu in Somalia, killed 150 terrorists there. So, the war spreads, and it is a war. The war spreads through Africa now, there and in Libya as well. And it's hard to get your act together if you don't have, political will and solidarity. So if I were a member of the EU, of the UK, if I were voting in June, I would say, gee, we got to stay a long distance away from that. We don't want any of that here. We want to separate ourselves from being vulnerable, being exposed, such as all these other places. Sounds like this is going to be a very interesting election and a lot of rhetoric moving up to the election.
Yeah, I agree with you. But there are some issues that you cannot actually walk away from at all, even if you're outside of the EU, as Great Britain would,
True.
because
True.
despite even if there was no EU, there are visa-free travels and working permits between industrialized countries that exist. So I would imagine that travel is quite free, right?
Yes.
As it is right now between the US and other EU member states, or even other industrialized countries. So travel is quite free already. There is though a consideration when it comes to resettling and long work processes. But again, I when it comes to something as smaller as the EU, and the level of integration that they've reached, also the common market that they have, I think it's going to be quite difficult to really resolve in the next few years, even if the UK were to quit the EU, and then there's this whole long procedure of quitting, of leaving the membership. So that would take a few years as well.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be a good thing. Well, let's take a short break, Gauri. This Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum in Brussels. We're talking about migrants, money, and madness. When we come back, I'd like to talk about some of the more interesting aspects of the madness. We'll be right back.
Aloha, this is Maria Mera, and I'm here to invite you to my bilingual show, Viva Hawaii on Think Tech Hawaii, every other Monday at 3 p.m. We're here to inform, motivate, and entertain you. Join us. Hola, soy María Mera y estoy aquí para invitaros a mi show bilingüe Viva Hawaii en Think Tech Hawaii cada 2 lunes a las 3 de la tarde. Estamos aquí para informaros, motivaros y entreteneros. Apuntaros.
Aloha, my name is Matt, and this is my co-host Justine, and we are from Hawaii Food and Farmers Series, coming to you every Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m.
The purpose of the show is to bring on Hawaii's farmers, as well as all the other folks, organizations, and individuals that are part of our local food system. We like to get their backstory and history and find out why they're motivated to do the work that they do. And we also like to pick their brain about what they see for the future of local food in Hawaii.
So see us every Thursday at 4 o'clock at Think Tech Hawaii.
Thank you. See you then.
Okay. Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum, joins us by Skype here at midnight in Brussels, talking about migrants, money, and madness. Let's talk about the madness part. In the U.S., and I have a feeling you see as much of it as we do, the television has occupied all the news channels anyway, and some of the ones that are not news are occupied 24/7 by the election, mostly about the Republicans. And I think, that's kind of unfair because it gets everybody interested in the Republican struggle. And when it comes time to vote, they may wind up continuing their interest in the Republican struggle and voting for the Republican. And the Democrats are relatively quiet, it almost seems like. So tell me the last time you mentioned that nobody liked Trump, has that changed? In this country, he seems to have the leading edge, but has that changed in Europe?
I don't think so. I doubt it, Actually, we're all surprised how Donald Trump is is getting ahead, you know. It's kind of this denial that's come up that, okay, maybe first people were taking it as a joke and that's why he's going ahead. Maybe that is it, you know. People are still thinking it's a joke, but, you know, wake up now, it's getting serious kind of thing.
Really?
But I mean, it's just surprising, you know. It's kind of the shock and the paralysis of that rise of Donald Trump, and that it's a reality that's not sinking in. You know,
Does anybody like him? Does anybody say, well, you know, he's really a nice person, and this is all just to win the election, and when it comes down to it, he's going to be much more moderate? Or do people like him because he's not moderate? You know, he's been called lately a fascist, which is not a good word here, and I'm sure it's not a good word in Europe either.
oh my God,
Do people
it's
see
almost
him that
a
way?
swear word in Europe. It's, I think, one of the top swear words. But of course, there might be some people. I doubt who, you know, but there might be a handful of people that might be thinking, okay, well, he's building a wall, you know, for the migrants, and, you know, he has these plans, and what are we doing here in a way? But still, the vast majority would not even say half the things he does, you know, and I don't think that anybody really who knew Trump from before, and, you know, from his Apprentice shows, and, you know, and a number of his failed businesses would really think that he's someone to look up to and someone who would do well, you know. I mean, it's all about, I mean, I guess people are just waiting for Hillary to be president, and that's a kind of a no-brainer here, because that's all we know, you know. Most of the people, of course, know Hillary Clinton quite well. The Republican candidates, people here don't know so well. We don't follow, most of the people here don't follow the debate so much, you know. I mean, you get the main highlights of what's happening, but not the real debate. But from what we hear, from what I hear from all the comedy channels as well, is that the Republicans are just, you know, it's quite a childish debate, and they're pinpointing at each other, and the Democrats are the ones discussing real issues.
Last time we spoke, you mentioned that because Europe has a kind of socialist approach in many ways these days, social safety net kind of socialism,
Yes.
that a lot of people liked Bernie Sanders. Has that changed?
No, it's not changed at all. Actually, if you go on my Twitter page, you'll see, you know, the background picture says feeling the burn, you know, and it's so true. I mean, he's such a good candidate. I really don't understand why the vast majority of Americans who are middle class, yes, why would they not vote for someone who's aiming to strengthen their position? It's incredible. I mean, he's trying to take on the 1%, which got richer during the crisis statistically. Why would people not vote for him? Why would people still choose? I mean, a lot of people already go for the Republicans, but also Hillary Clinton, because she has been a lot more pro Wall Street than him, you know, than Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
But he has, from what I've been assessing, he has gained a lot of votes. Is that right?
Yeah, well, he does, but he's trailing Hillary, not by all that much, and you know, he still has a chance. But let me offer you this thought. You know, recently, after Rubio got hurt in the last couple of primaries, he started doing television ads. And in fact, over the weekend, we saw a little else but Rubio television ads. Not so much from any of the other candidates. And I thought that was interesting. And it foretells, well, it shows that he's a little desperate, and he's going to spend his money on television to try to recoup. But as we get closer to, you know, the convention and all that, I think we're going to find a lot of television ads from the front runners. They're going to be spending millions and millions and millions of dollars in television ads, in the thought that the American public is susceptible to being persuaded by television ads. And we know that. That's the way it works, and that's why they spend so many millions of dollars on them. But I'm wondering about Europe. Are television ads in political contests that effective in Europe? Do people buy into that? Are they susceptible to being persuaded by some slick television ads there?
That is so interesting. I mean, is it, do you mean television ads? Like, I mean, is he selling himself or other product? It's himself, right?
Himself and bashing the other candidate.
Yeah, but yeah, I've seen some of this when I think I was in Hawaii as well. There were some local elections going on. Um, Most people in Europe hardly watch TV.
This is
It's really
very healthy.
most people in Europe hardly watch TV, you know, and cable in particular. I mean, hardly many people watch it, and it's so funny, you know, to see kind of these politicians selling themselves over on the television. It's incredible in a way for Europe, you know. It wouldn't happen rather. You do see a lot of posters um, and you know the traditional pamphlets and you know people campaigning themselves, but I've never seen it. I would actually not watch so much TV as well. But you know another added issue here is language. I mean, which TV do you advertise on? You know, because
Yeah, right.
in Belgium itself there are 3 languages.
Right, so
So
you're not going to
what
spend all
language
that
is
much
being
money on it if it only goes to one country and so forth.
Yeah. One of the issues I also wanted to highlight here is that in Europe, the way we see it is that been a bit of a change coming. I don't know if you see it, Jay, but the Republican Party, which is I think the oldest party is in the US, that's undergoing a transformation, isn't it?
Yes, I think the Donald Trump has sort of fomented that transformation, but it's
Yeah.
clear there's a struggle going on and is changing.
But do the Republicans themselves realize it?
Some of them, but I think that you know Trump has been so successful that maybe they don't have choices. Maybe they can't overcome his juggernaut.
Because you know, recently I heard that it's the party of Abe Lincoln, and it's surprising. I mean, what Trump is saying is so much in contrast with you know the ideals that Abe Lincoln had for the party, perhaps, and it's a complete you know 360-degree turn almost.
Yeah.
And this is what happens with grand old parties at the moment. Also, if you see the Congress party in India is the oldest political party, and what they're suffering is the leadership crisis, but no one within the party is willing to recognize it.
Yeah, and
Every-
parties have lost their relevance in so many places, and I think the Republicans have lost it. It's completely different than Abe Lincoln's Republican Party for sure.
Exactly.
The other thing that comes to mind, closing point, is that you know in the U.S. we are totally preoccupied, distracted, you know, in our daily lives with this race that's going on for months, years already, and will still go on until next November. We put so much; it sucks all the oxygen out of everything to have this you know big campaign or number of campaigns going on every single day. It's like watching a football game that never ends. And I wonder how that is in Europe. In Europe, I imagine people get their information from the print press more than TV, as you said, and from talking to each other and sharing ideas. But also, elections happen relatively quickly, don't they? A month or two and you're done. You don't spend years campaigning.
Yeah, it's really quickly done. You have 2 candidates, you know, maximum that who you know, and they've been speaking for the past 2 months or something, and that's it, easily done. And you know, you have a new leader. Especially the French elections are done quite quickly, and you know the people, you know the person who is going to be campaigning many years before.
Yeah. So
Like
I take it, I'm just gathering from all that I know, is that you would prefer the European style.
myself,
Yes.
I don't know. The US way seems much more interesting, you know. That's a bit of spice to life because here it's a bit boring otherwise.
Well,
It is
that takes us back to the Chinese proverb that we started with. We live in interesting times. This is
It's like a
yet another.
reality show, you know. It's really like a reality show that you're watching every day. And politics is interesting in the US. But coming back on a serious serious note, I just want to point out one thing. If you the correlation between what's happening in the U.S. and in Europe, yeah. I mean, Donald Trump is someone who also kind of seems so similar to the rise of the far right parties here, and you know why? It's because he's the only one, like the far right parties here, who are willing to talk about issues that are troubling common people, and he's reading their mind, you know.
Yes.
And that would be controversial, but the mainstream people are not ready to do that, and they're not giving radical solutions. And he, like the far right parties, is the only one, you know. They're the only ones coming up with these kind of radical, if untenable, solutions.
Yes, it's
Isn't it right?
iconoclast, but you're right. It appeals to people, and they want to have the conversation anyway.
Exactly.
Gauri, we're gonna meet again in a month. I'm looking forward to that. We'll write. We'll send email to each other in the meantime, and we'll see you in a month from now. Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum, joining us every 4 weeks from Brussels, midnight in Brussels. Today we talked about migrants, money, and madness, and I'm sure there'll be other things to talk about again when we meet again. Thank you so much, Gauri.
Thank you so much, Jay. Thanks to your readers as well. Looking forward.